Yo, yo, yo. Alright. So you guys can hear me? Seems like it. Alright. Put this shit in. Okay. Just playing some marbles. The little drum machine patch I made. Alright, so yeah, I was just trying to get this like sidecar shut up. Shut up. Sidecar shit set up on my iPad, but it's not working. So whatever. I'm gonna try to use this Streamlabs deck to be able to see my chat here. Alright, so pretty much today what we're going to be talking about is the basics of synthesis. Why is that cool? Because there's a ton of shit that you will definitely never learn about. Thank you for the follow. I'm not sure who just followed me. Trying to be good with my social media and tweet that I'm live. And sent. Let's go. Alright, so if you guys are in my Discord, I sent class materials, and that like class materials includes like the whole outline of what I'm about to talk about today. If you haven't joined my Discord yet, just hit my Twitter. Sift through my complaints about life first, and then you'll be able to find my links to my real work. So I be complaining, y'all. I be on Twitter complaining. Thank you, Aperture. Alright, sick. This OBS app is actually working pretty well. Alright, so yesterday I was having some problems with my my mic here. It looks like it's working fine. But yeah, apparently this Motu, or it's not even the Motu, because I looked into all of it, and Focusrite had like a little thing on just regular OBS. OBS. Flipped the thing around. Yeah, so pretty much it doesn't really interface, so just anybody who's trying to stream, this is actually some good shit to know, because it's very dumb. So you see this? No control. So it doesn't matter what I do, audio input or audio output, it's always that. So pretty much what I have to do right now is I have to have Soundflower and this other virtual routing thing set up in this thing called Black Hole. And that's free online. It's just like Soundflower, except it has support. So it's actually better than Soundflower. So I'm using both so I can use my, live and all the other shit. But I'm actually going to make a little tutorial on what I did here for this setup. But yeah, so I looked into it online. It was a bunch of little like loopback things, just a ton of patchers that were like $150 or whatever, to sell to streamers who don't know shit. And about audio at least. They probably know some shit about Fortnite though. They probably teach me some shit. But like, so what I did here is I have two audio modules. Send audio in from device, and that's my mic right here. Send a little high pass, little compressor, little limiter. Just take full advantage of the fact that I can use this. And then I patched it into left and right. And then in here, just allocate my black hole, and that's it. So pretty much, I'm gonna have to have this patch live always. Oh man, Audible Instruments needs an update. Alright, well, I probably won't use that right now. Okay, so I'm going to actually be in VCV Rack for a little bit. So, I think it was Aperture. I saw like you say something about you can get audio out. And this is the whole thing right here. This is kind of like what you have to have set up. Another thing is you do need your buffer sizes to line up, or else you will have dropouts. You know, so like if this is at a faster buffer size than this, or vice versa, you're going to have like some clicks and pops and stuff. That's pretty much all you're going to hear. So you just need the sunk. Yeah, so all this stuff is recorded, always. Big thing is I don't want to go and like kind of sell this all out and then just have people be able to like pick and choose the things. It's just like a guided course. Here you go. I'm feeding it to you, and it's all free. It's public school. Alright, so yeah, I'll make a little like YouTube video about this, because honestly, this little patch that took me 5 minutes to set up saved me $150, and that's kind of annoying. Alright, so pretty much I don't even need to break this. What's great about VCV Rack is this is a module, and so I can make as many modules as I want. And yeah, I'm using this multi-output device, so it like mirrors my outputs and stuff. You guys don't need to worry about that. But when I set up an output here, that's how it's going to be. Okay, so when I set up a patch in VCV Rack, you're going to have your default patch, you know, the standard one that's just like a subtractive synth, and you can play it and it triggers now. So that's cool. But yeah, we're going to start from like the components up here. So I'm going to get a little patch set up, and then we're going to kind of break it down, because pretty much the whole point of why I wrote that whole curriculum out for you guys to look at, I wasn't just, you know, stretching or flexing. You know, it's just, it's stuff that when I teach people, it's like a common, is it too loud? Hitting that red. That makes me feel a little loud. But yeah, anyways, so when I teach people, I end up having to word. Yeah, let me turn this down to the yellow. Check. All right, cool. Okay, so yeah, now with this I'm not gonna have to worry about my track being in Ableton. That's super annoying. Okay, so let's backtrack here. So what I was saying is that when I teach people, people that know how to produce, they'll come to me with tracks, you know, fully done, all that shit, and they'll just be like, "Well, this is done, bro. What do you need me for?" It's like, "Oh, no shit about synthesis." And it's like, well, all right, can I backtrack with you? Like, where is the base of your knowledge? And most people don't know the building blocks of a waveform, you know. When I ask them what a harmonic is, you know, it's like, what is that? And I have to tell them, like, oh, that's what that thing does. You know, and it really shouldn't be that. You know, it really should be like, you already know that, and you're like, oh, that's cool. That's how that's utilizing that thing. It's not a, like, large braining life and shit. It's literally just knowing how to use shit from the ground up. And that's, like, how you get, like, really good. Not just, like, you know, oh, dude, don't even fucking, like, praise me, bro. I don't do shit, blah, blah. It's like, you could not be that. You could be something else. And there's a ton of info online now about everything. And so you can't really say, like, you know, there's no knowledge out there. But you also got to take into account who's teaching you, you know? Bedroom producers teaching bedroom producers how to do this one sound. All right, so if you're gonna start your whole like basis of your knowledge around the aspect of copying, like, is that really gonna benefit, you know, the baseline of the sound of the scene? You know, are you gonna get to a point where you're actually popping? You know, where you're, you know, because the people that pop are the people who don't give one fuck. So they don't give a fuck that they don't know anything. They don't give a fuck what people think of their music, and they just do it. And that's kind of like how you have to do it. You can't like step around it. But you're so much stronger if you actually know what the fuck you're doing. And that's like, you know, just to what I was saying right there, you know, if you're gonna, you could, you know, I guess just big dick everything. I guess that's a terrible way to put it, but like, you know, like, that's just kind of how it comes off, where it's like, you are good at everything, dude. I get it. But, you know, could you tell me like the basics of these things? You know, do you actually know what the EQ does, or how a fucking compressor works? You know, so it's like that. Those are little things that when you get to that point with that kind of like, you know, backbone, with that confidence, unbridled confidence, because it's just like you're good at everything, you end up not wanting to listen to people. And you don't want to listen to people when they're telling you something that's like fact, you know? It's not like, oh, this is hearsay, my opinion, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, this is this, and you're doing that, and it's not objective anymore. I'm just stating it. And that might trigger you. But I'm, you know, sorry. Whoops. Yeah. So, you know, that's just like the whole point. That's why this is here, and I'm doing this because I don't want to go and like tell people blah 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 anymore. I just want to have the way I think out there, you know. I've trained a fuck ton of people who are like actually like really big producers, and like, you know, I teach them exactly everything that, you know, I fucking rant about. There's no difference from me now to me 5 years ago. So anyways, with that like philosophy out of the way, let's start from the ground up and talk about the basics of synthesis. So right click anywhere in VCV Rack and it'll bring up your whole menu of stuff. So let's just get an oscillator, and I'm going to get one of the basic ones. These are cool. These are actually by Rich. But I just need the enrich at subverse. Just get a VCV one. Okay, and I'm going to Command D this, and I'm going to send this just to my multi out. You guys should be able to hear it. One sec. Okay. My bad. Alright, so you guys should still be able to hear me like this. What I'm going to do, just so I don't have another freak out like that, just because I don't want my audio driver to freak out more, I'm just going to sum this. And I'm going to go over that later. Okay, so we got a little mixer here, got an oscillator, and I'm going to cut out for a second. Alright, you guys can probably hear me now. Left speaker, both speakers now. Alright. Okay, so I'm going to hook up my oscillator to the output. Oh, one sec. Let me actually patch this so I can hear it. Like, why do I not hear it? Just because it's being patched. Yeah, just a million workarounds. I'm gonna master this, but just disregard all this really quick. I'm gonna have to send this 2 places whenever I send it anywhere. Okay, I'm just patching that into my extra audio channel. That's what's great about that. Okay, so we got a sine wave here. Actually get another VU so I can see what's going on here. Okay, so I'm sure you guys know what a sine wave is made up of. That's pretty much just the fundamental frequency. So in that little like course guide outline, I talk about the harmonic series. So when I say the fundamental, this applies to that harmonic series. Let me bring up text edit here. So I wrote this little course outline in. Okay, so right here. So this is your homework for sure, and it should be just like only beneficial. And that's pretty much committing all these numbers to memory. So when I say the fundamental, I'm talking about 0. So only one harmonic, you understand that. So when I'm talking about a sine wave, fundamental, no overtones. Now when I say sawtooth, I'm saying odd and even harmonics, neg 6 dB per octave per slope. Square, odd harmonics, neg 6 dB per octave slope. Triangle is the same exact thing as a square wave, but at a neg 12. So that makes it quieter in its overtones. So you could even argue that a triangle could be a filtered down square. That's hilarious. My voice is being affected by the sign. Is it still being affected? I'm gonna have to like mute it whenever I start talking. That's hilarious. It's like pretty much amplitude modulating my voice. I'm gonna have to just like set up a patch off stream with these audio drivers set up here so I don't freak everything out. But yeah, anyways. So I was saying the square wave, triangle, sawtooth, they're all made up of these numbers in the harmonic series. So these numbers ascend to, 512 up above that. So when we talk about serum, that's funny. Yeah, so when you go above, anything above that, like you're really not accessing anything you can really hear, because if you see like these numbers, it's exponentially increasing. It's not just going by what they would call a chromatic modulation, or a chromatic interval rather, because these are not just numbers that sound good. These are like literally the conglomeration of 1,000 years plus of human knowledge, just confined to these numbers, because this harmonic series is something that occurs naturally in nature, something that is kind of the fundamental building block of sound in general. And because of these relationships, our ears develop in certain ways. Like we have sensitivity to certain ranges of hearing, like 3.2 kilohertz, because of like babies, things like that. We have certain, things that we associate with that. And then also, in order to explain these phenomena too, like how would you go and, match up the tonality of certain things? Why would you want to go and put a sawtooth up an octave in a fifth? Why does that always just sound pleasing when that happens? That's kind of one of the biggest things to like keep in mind when like learning about the harmonic series is that that's what you're actually understanding, is that you're getting to know why this stuff works. So another thing that this is huge for, and that's harmonics in general. So the word harmonic, so when I load up Operator and I pretty much like change that value, I think I have an operator loaded up, coarse tuning. So coarse tuning, whenever you see the word coarse tuning, and this is something that was kind of coined by FM synths like the DX7, that is always referring to the harmonic series. It is never not, and I have seen very few times where it has. The only time it has not corresponded with the harmonic series is in Serum, which, in my opinion, I don't agree with it, because that coarse setting in general doesn't have any real definable scale. So I think that's a really dumb feature in Serum, and I stand by it. Maybe make an option to change it into the harmonic series. Allow you to go above 4 octaves. Easy. Anyways, that's one thing I really don't like about Serum. Okay, so yeah, so that's like a huge thing to like keep in mind. Yeah, it's just that like, yeah, shots fired for sure. But you know, like, that's one of the things that you become aware of once you start to understand like kind of the fundamental things about waveforms. So, you know, all these things correspond to this. Once you understand this, this makes a lot more sense. So you can actually utilize these things in different ways. And these are just the basic ones. And that's my like biggest thing about this, is that these are the basic waveforms. And there are much more complex waveforms out there. Like a format waveform. Like a format waveform is probably one of the most interesting waveforms ever, because that's one of the things, you know, one of the big reasons why I say that like our ears have adapted to this scale, and it's a naturally occurring phenomenon. It's not it's like a law of physics almost, you know. It's like the resonance. I don't even know what it is. It's hard to explain, but it is something that is everywhere. And even when you get down to just frequencies in general, it's not even about sound anymore. If you're talking about light frequencies, these light frequencies also correspond. So everything pertaining to frequency that they use to like measure things is measured in like frequencies that do coincide with these scales. So that's why you got a lot of like for me personally, once I learned that, it like made me pretty much get into a lot of crazy spiritual things with sound. And I went pretty deep into sound healing just because I was really curious. And I've come back to say it's all bullshit. No, it's not. It's really just about, you know, the intention the listener engages the thing with. It's not about the thing itself. In certain occasions, there is. And I give this like example a lot when I say like sound healing music doesn't have that much effect, because there is an exception to it, and there's only few exceptions to it, and that's this one track. Whoops. It's called Weightless by Marconi Union, and it's like, I just always talk about it because people freak out about it. It's being studied by scientists because it like decreases inflammation. What the fuck? And they like study people's faces and shit. It's interesting. But yeah, so then corresponding with that, we have noise. And noise is completely different. It's chaos. So noise can be used as a filler. You know, it can be used to make effect sounds just by itself. It can be used as an oscillator type It can be used as a percussion sound. Pretty much anything that you want to use as an impulse for something. So when I strike a pick onto a string, it creates, a whole, higher order of harmonics. But these harmonics aren't, perfect like a square wave. They aren't perfect like any of the basic waveforms synthesized by a synthesizer. They're random seemingly. And the actual tonality of an instrument is literally dictated by the size of it, the weight, the construction of the chassis. That all comes comes into play when defining the actual overtone structure of a sound. So when we talk about mixing and stuff, because that's going to be a big thing, when we talk about phasing, harmonics, it's going to be another thing, because the harmonic series is literally one of the building blocks of understanding sound, not synthesis. Okay, so I define noise in 4 different types. There's a couple of other different types, and those are really under the umbrella of brown or red. But you have loop sample, room tone or Foley, which is a random recorded sample of some type of thing. And I have this article that also makes a bunch of I guess real world examples of noise. So noise is something that is super soothing to people. It's generated naturally by wind, ocean, anything that's constantly moving and seemingly random. So loop sample is the least random because you're looping a sample. But it can be noise, so it's almost. So pink noise is probably the most useful and probably the most used noises in say a non-production sense. This is used to shoot rooms, as well as it's used for therapy and stuff, and used to soothe people while they sleep, because this is the most similar to the ocean, because it has a low shelf boost, which means that it's being boosted in the lows with a decreased high end. And there's very, very specific definitions, but if I were to tell you them, you probably would just right over your head. So we can get into that some other point. If I was to actually tell you the algorithm of calculating pink noise, but that's not needed. So white noise is the most commonly known, I suppose, and that's flat curve, equal values. And when I say equal values, back to this definition right here, all frequencies represented equally. So when I say harmonics, these are a defined scale of harmonics, and scale is another word to keep in mind, because there is a set scale and there's a quantization that happens, and that sounds pretty weird to say together, but when you think about modular stuff and terms that refer to modular things, scale and quantization actually really coincide. Because if you were to filter the incoming random signal of, say, noise, and then you can run that through some type of filter that scales this random noise into values that are on some type of defined minor ninth scale. I say that because I like that chord. And then it'll retune it like an auto tuner. So, alright. Brown, red noise, similar to pink, but this one is just a straight up boost. So pink noise, I was saying, is a calculated curve. And it's to kind of create room nodes and a bunch of other things that are really beneficial. So brown and red noise is like white noise, but it's just being shifted. They also refer to it as black noise too. So black, red, brown. Just one of those minority colors, right? Am I right, guys? Fuck them, dude. Fuck those dudes, bro. Fuck them, dude. Fuck. Why couldn't we be white noise, dude? Alright. Alright, so that's a bunch of shit to know. bunch of shit to think about. So now back into, you know, synthesis and not so much theory. Kind of back up a little bit more into here. So I was talking about the sine wave. So anytime you hear a sound, and I want to talk about the qualities and timbre, you know, because that's another thing, and I didn't really make it a huge point in here because I just want you guys to, like, if you're going to use this as a reference, just to hold on to these things. I don't want to bog it down with a bunch of other knowledge and stuff that is a little bit more advanced. So I'm going to be alluding to a lot of stuff that is a little bit more advanced than this, but it will make sense if you're confused at some point. Or you can just send me personal questions right now. Yo, where that deep purple noise at? That's great. Okay, so talking about timbre, tonality, quality. So I say like all those different definitions because that is literally how they define it in a lot of ways. So if I was to say, you know, here's the quality of a cello, or here's the timbre of a clarinet, and I wanted you to go and emulate that, not using a sample. Yeah, and this would be a good assignment, but I think it's a little bit much for week one. You know, like, what waveform would you use to emulate a string? What waveform would you use to emulate a clarinet? And what would you use to emulate a drum? You know, so all these different waveforms have different, like, uses. Motherfucking sine for everything, dude. Sine wave everything, yo. I pray to the sine every day. The sine is my building block. Yo, sine is my God. Sine God, yo. Hashtag sine God. Sine wave everything, yo. Hashtag sine God, yo. You started now. You can't see me, but I'm like doing that fucking, you know, thing with my hands right now. It's like halfway between like a, you know, devil horns and like just a limp hand. Alright, so back to what I was saying about the quality of shit. So if I was saying I want you to make a flute, can anybody in the chat right now tell me what waveform would be best to make a flute with? I like it. Give it a couple more seconds. Ooh. Okay, so it is sine. It is triangle as well, but triangle is a little bit more useful for, say, a bell tone, like a soft bell tone, or something else, something tube-like. And so that gets into the next quality of something. When I'm listening to a sine wave, I hear a pure tone. Okay, so it's just one frequency. So when I'm trying to redefine the quality of a sound to emulate something, say like a flute, I'm gonna probably look at the waveform of a flute, and maybe I can even bring one up here. Probably have a couple flute samples on here somewhere. Hey, just break out a couple. I might have one or two laying around. Maybe in the back here. Load up a spectrum. take it off auto here. Okay, so this overtone structure here on this bamboo flute is similar to a triangle wave. But what I'm really looking at is this fundamental. And so I did actually say a couple other, like, I guess, keywords in defining quality and timbre, because all that stuff is, like, for me as a sound designer person that designs sounds people, you know, really poorly describe. You know, somebody hires me to do a sound design thing and they're like I got hired by Nike to do this shoe ad, and it was a flower that turned into a shoe, and they were like, I need a poof here, and then it unfolds and goes floof, and they literally said that shit. Not gonna lie. Make it yoink, bro. Okay, so talking about quality and timbre again, tube-like will pretty much, you know, kind of dictate exactly which instrument I'm doing. So if I'm going to do a clarinet or something that's a darker, lower timbre, then I'm going to use a square wave or a triangle wave. If I'm going to do like a flute, piccolo flute, some other kind of like really metallic, I would say, is another good quality to put on there. So that's not just by itself. You know, if I was to be like in the Moog synthesizer, say an era 1960 to 1975, these would be my limitations, unless I had access to an EMU, which were back then $250,000 plus. So, you know, make it work somehow. So like, you would add noise into that sine wave, saturate it, and filter it. So to what Baron was saying, putting a little distortion on there, but you do have to have noise in there in order to give it that air quality. So air equals noise in that sense. So now when I'm talking about like another sound, say like a trumpet. Can anybody tell me what a trumpet might be emulated by? In the chat. For you, Ori, yeah, a muted trumpet. Okay, so the answer is sawtooth. Mary, you were right. So sawtooth, because the closest representation of the harmonics of a brass instrument is all odd and even harmonics. So that plus a low pass filter can literally equal a tuba in less than 5 minutes or your money back. Guaranteed. Out the door warranty. 50-year APR. No financing. It's also free real estate. Okay, so those are kind of like the general properties of the waveforms. So noise is there to represent air, some type of timbre being spat into, and like that's literally the mentality of like, I need this to spit, I need it to sound like spit. So you have to modulate noise into like a little sawtooth if you want to really emulate a trumpet, and you can do that with FM easily. So yeah, so that's good things to keep in mind. Yeah, you got your woodwinds, that's your square. You have your, you know, upper register higher instruments, and that's your sine waves. And then all of your low brass, and string instruments are sawtooth. So like a Vangelis, Blade Runner type string orchestra, that would be all sawtooths with low pass filters. Yeah, so so noise is probably the craziest out of all 4 of those, or I should say 5, because it can be used for any type of synthesis. It can also be used at any point. You don't need a synthesizer. If you go and just record a sample or use a percussion loop, you can do the same types of processes you would create a string out of noise with to go and do that to any percussive sound or whatever. That's a lot of shit I do in the anti-negative music. A lot of that harmonic stuff. And that's all Karplus strong synthesis. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so those are the basic waveform food groups. You should familiarize yourself with them, because it'll literally only help you understand and make stuff quicker. So I sometimes overthink stuff, and I'll go way into like a synth and make a sound and just be like, ass, I hate this. And then I'll go and make a basic Reese with like a couple sawtooths and be like, wow, this is the greatest shit I've ever done, but I literally just did this yesterday. So sometimes it just takes going back to what sounds good, and not over complexifying it. But yeah, it's cool to grow, do new shit though. That's what I'm about. So really crucial you understand that. If you don't understand that, hit me up, let me know. I can probably help you understand it a little bit quicker, but I'm gonna have to like really sit with you, get down to the numbers. Numbers are scary sometimes. Okay, so now into the next big point here is the components. And this last thing is just going to be kind of an overview, run through kind of thing. So components of a synth. So I'm not going to like quiz you on this right now, because that's on the bottom right here. I'm going to quiz you. I mean, you don't have to take the quiz, but you don't get a grade if you don't take the quiz. And you don't get a diploma if you don't get a grade. Alright, so the most basic pieces of a synth are the voice engine. And I say that out of order here because that is one of the big things here, and that's a big point I made in signal flow MIDI here. So understanding signal flow is more important than understanding MIDI at first, because understanding signal flow will allow you to go and apply some of that shit I just said about taking some noise from a percussive loop and then going and using the process you use on a synth on an audio track, because that'll allow you to think like that, allow you to be routing here, I do this, this is a waveform, I'm going to put a filter here and do that. So it's really crucial that you understand what these terms mean, and then also what signal flow is in all these terms. These are really crucial. So amp, or VCA, voltage controlled amplifier, controls the volume or voltage of an incoming signal to an output, powered either by digital, solid state, tape, tube, or Vactral low pass gate. And I say that's advanced because it is. With just that last one, Vactral. So everybody should know this when you think of an amp, because that's every guitar amp in existence. Digital solid state amp would be, if you know guitars, like a Line 6 or any new Marshall, because all Marshalls suck ass. and then tape tube. So you can amplify the signal off of a tape. You can use a tape machine to filter your signal and run amplitude through it. Tube allows you to power a signal. Preamp tubes, you have, power amp tubes, you have many different types of tubes. So that all goes into play when using a VCA or an amp. You can't just turn the thing up and down and it does the thing. You have to go and do something to it in order to do the thing. And that's changing the voltage of that signal. That's the thing that it's doing with the ting. The ting is that knob. Alright, so VCO, voltage controlled oscillator. It should be self-explanatory. So a voltage controls the frequency of an oscillator. And VCF, a voltage controls the frequency of a filter. So I left those barren because this should kind of explain these two. And then me talking about it now also explains it more. Hence you being here and watching the video. Hence these being notes and not a script. Alright, so signal flow MIDI. That's the next thing to understand. Signal flow before MIDI. Series routing. One thing goes after another. When I route something in series, one thing after another. So when I route things in series, I route one thing after the other. That's what series means. So I told you what it meant, told you what I was going to tell you, and then I told you again. So you shouldn't forget what this means. So parallel routing, it's like series, where things flow after each other, but now it's to the side. It's different preposition. So they're running along each other, alongside. So like parallel compression, parallel routing. Anytime you're routing something in a DAW, that's parallel. And it sums to the output when a bunch of signals hit the output of some type. And I say of some type because it doesn't matter what the output is. And when we're talking about modular, that really doesn't matter. You can send the output of anything into anything and it will do something because it's all voltage. When we're in digital modular, you have to go and convert data into different types of data. So, when we're talking about VCV, I think I was talking about that earlier in the chat in my Discord. The VCV is literally 101 version of all modular. But understanding this is very crucial to really applying that knowledge well and understanding what you're doing. Because it's really about logic at the end of the day. You have to understand the logic, and if the logic is something you're trying to learn along the way, while doing the thing you're trying to create something with, it'll sound like that. It would sound like you're trying to learn how to use a synth. It'll sound like you just use a cymatics patch and twisted a couple macros. It'll sound like that because those sounds have been used a lot of times. And doing something a little bit different with FM on a cymatics patch that's literally a carbon copy of a virtual riot waveform is not something new. I'm sorry. And I'm bored. Okay, so summing, additive, and subtractive. These are going to have multiple meanings. So additive means mixer. Summing, they're adding multiple things parallel to one input or one output, I would say. So 5 inputs summing together 5 different waveforms or 5 oscillators before you go and send it to a filter. So that's additive. And this definition is probably the most generalized, summed up definition I could create when more than one signal gets summed to the output. Because when I'm talking about synthesis, it literally means the same thing. Additive should always mean adding. Subtractive always means subtracting. Anytime you subtract value from frequency or dynamics. So compression would be considered a subtractive process, and expansion is considered an additive process. When I push gain on an EQ, it's additive. When I subtract it, it's subtractive. So literally logical definitions. Okay, so now into MIDI. because this stuff is the building blocks of signal flow. You understand this, I will be able to explain more advanced things in signal flow. Alright, because really the point here is that like once I actually start going, it's going to be fast. And I'm going to say a lot of shit and teach a lot of stuff, and you guys are going to have questions, but really you'll be able to go back to some of the basic shit where I'm explaining some of this. Because if you want to use max, reactor, any type of modular, you have to know this. 100% have to know all this shit in order to actually be effective with the modular synth. Unless you just want to ride the hype, you know. Alright, so MIDI, also known as the voice engine. So voice engine is this. So MIDI triggers my voice engine, and it's filtered into different values. Okay, so just zoom in here. So this is kind of a summation of all the most important pieces of information that are coming from MIDI. So MIDI has a bunch of shit in it. It has 4 ports. Ports meaning these are a different set of inputs. Each port has 16 inputs. And I really should rewrite this, but I'm actually going to go into that again when I actually apply the MIDI stuff. This is just talking about what it does. So don't freak out. So you can send this to a bunch of different places. In VCV Rec, you can send one thing to multiple destinations, and by dragging from the input to the output, you can latch them on like this. Okay, so MIDI includes the most basic thing a synth needs, which is pitch and gates. So these two things absolutely have to be patched in order for your synth to work right. So I'm not really going to talk about envelopes today, but in order to trigger an envelope, and that's hooked up to all your main things, you know, because I knew like a lot of stuff about harmonic series will probably be really draining for a lot of people, so I'm sure you're gonna have to go back and listen to some of this stuff again. Drunken Rampage, nice. Slew limiter. Okay, so pitch and gate here. I was loading up an envelope. Where'd it go? Alright, I'll just load up this one. Doesn't matter. Actually, it does. That one looks a little bit confusing. Let's just use this one. Okay. Don't worry, y'all. I'm on your side. Alright, so this one has 2 basic inputs here. Gate triggers the envelope on. So gate is different from pitch because pitch is constant. When I hit a note on my keyboard, it triggers a constant value. It's also called CV, controlled voltage, very similar to VCO, VCF, and VCA. VCO, VCF, VCV, VC. Alright, so I did mention a couple other things in here, which is velocity, and I wanted to mention these because these actually do have a different theory behind it. So we're saying gate is momentary, an impulse generated by MIDI that goes and triggers a thing to go on. It triggers a 0 to a 1 in voltage form. This holds a value, does not change unless you trigger another note. So it gives you the illusion that you're playing a note and it's turning off, but really the envelope has finished its sequence. And that's the big thing. The envelope has finished its sequence. Oscillators always running, always on, and that's the big thing to always know. Is that if you're in a a live hardware situation with a synth, you have to let your oscillators warm up because they gotta get up to speed, you know, especially if it's an older synth, over 40 years old, you know, or more. So constant value, controlled voltage, gate, triggers, also known as trigger, gate, also known as triggers. Okay, so those are crucial things. Velocity now and aftertouch. So another big thing about what MIDI does is it always triggers a certain value. 0 to 127. So value sent to VCO, impulse triggered to trigger an envelope or any gate-based things. Velocity, how hard you press a key converted to value. So, whoops, let's undo that. So, like if I push it really fast, it'll probably be like at 120, but really slow, how hard or how fast you hit a key. Because you could hit it fast and soft. So I like to define it as hard, because it really is hard, but it does depend on how fast you hit it too. So that's to emulate like a piano, have some expression to it. Aftertouch, pressing harder after holding a key to add value. Yeah, exactly. A gate is an off and on switch, hence my analogy to it being a voltage 0 and 1. Okay, so aftertouch, pressing harder on the key after holding the value, or after holding to add value. So this gives you another level of expression. Say if you were doing a flute emulation, and you wanted to create vibrato on anything. And I do this when I create vibrato on like stringed instruments and stuff, where if I hold it down harder, it starts to wobble a little bit more. Exactly. So more speed equals oh, wait, I was applying that to what I was just talking about. So the more you press it down, the faster it will wobble, or the more value the wobble will get. You know, similar to using mod wheel or pitch bend. And I didn't list those in here because those are a little bit more self-explanatory. So in here, pitch wheel and mod wheel are both patchable. And I'm going to have to do just, next week, setting up a patch in VCV. That's what we're going to be doing, because I don't want to go and bog you guys down with like a bunch of knowledge and then just jump into making a crazy patch. It's a little bit hard to route this stuff in here, but it is actually like a huge exercise in understanding signal flow again, because these are all separate outputs. So if my voltage octave, voltage per octave, my pitch is controlling the pitch of my oscillator, how do I get pitch wheel and mod wheel to also plug into here? That's a question that you're going to have to apply logic to. If I want this pitch to be summed, combined with this. I'm saying summed and combined because I want this to be all three of these into one. So I want to combine these three signals and send them into here. So when you're in Serum or any other soft synth, you don't have to worry about that shit. You just have pitch wheel, mod wheel hooked up. So in here it's barren. You do have to go and understand signal flow. So hence, back to the thing. If I'm going to teach you all modular, you have to understand this. So other things that MIDI also contains is clock information. So most people don't understand what clock is. So what is clock? Clock is based on some type of tempo. So it's like gate. It is gate. It's gate triggered pretty much a quarter note, you know, per minute. So BPM. So it's tap to tempo. Sick, bro. So that's what this is putting out. It's putting out clock. I can send clock over MIDI. So if I want to sync a bunch of synths together, I can send that clock over MIDI and sync. So every interface has a clock. And those clocks determine how good that interface is, how steady its driver is, how steady its actual sample rate is. Those are all super crucial to know. I'm not talking about that today because that's more of a mixing thing. You know, it's not really crucial to know that right now. Alright, so that's kind of the whole idea here, is to understand what these mean, why they're important to know. Gate triggers things. Kind of like political posts on my timeline, yo. I be triggered by that. So that should be a gate to me. And then pitch is always voltage per octave. Alright, so that, all that knowledge you guys should sit on it and digest it. Think about it, apply some of it. But if you were, you know, confused about what signal flow really meant, you know, in a synth, why you do that? Fix yourself. Yeah, hopefully that clears up some stuff, because there's, you know, a million more advanced things. If this is holding you back, it's really going to hold you back when you try to understand like a complex synth. Okay, so just to kind of rehash what we just talked about. Talked about the harmonic series, what that means, why it's important, and why we as humans, if we're going to make great music, we have to understand it. One really crazy thing about the harmonic series too is that if you tap into it, it can make you smarter. It can also add a foot to your height. And Nasty Nasty actually did that at the beginning of the year. And we're all really proud of him. Now, alright, so what's crazy about it is if you do understand this, if you know anything about Beethoven, Mozart, or anything like classical music actually stimulates people's minds in a way where it stimulates growth, because it does represent the natural tonality of nature, because they were able to go and say voicing was important. This is how you voice a flute. And so when you create a counterpoint based structure on like a classical piece of music like Mozart or whatever, you know, it can stimulate somebody to really see some visual shit. Where if he's trying to make Flight of the Bumblebee happen or some shit like that, and that's not Mozart, you know, that can literally be like told through, you know, both frequencies, harmonics, speed, you know, all that has intention. And that's also part of the course. I figured I might as well bring it in just for sync licensing modality, you know, like how to create mood music and what that actually means, and like, because I have a pretty, you know, deep understanding of theory, but when I apply it to music, I don't really like overthink it. It's not like, oh, I'm doing fucking 10 chord changes. It's like, no, I'm over that. It's really just about like understanding, you know, the basics of the vibe. You know, how to make it looming, how to make it uplifting, how to make it intelligent yet fully white background. How to make it a startup in San Francisco. How to make that in one patch. The YouTube video. Okay, so that is all crucial. You guys must know that. You must know this. If you do not know this, please let me know. If you don't know what's written right here, please let me know. Check out this article, it's pretty interesting. Okay, so just to sum up, you know, for our lesson today, we have some synthesis types I listed out here, because we're going to be getting into all these, and that's going to be fun. So this is just a 101 kind of introduction class today. You know, where are you at? I'm not going to ask you personally, because if I'm going to make this like a college course, I don't give a fuck if you don't learn. Does the information, take it or leave it. No, but hit me up if you don't really understand. Like, it's pretty confusing. So we got subtractive. So that's your basic type of synth. That's like the Juno, you know, Moog. Oscillator runs into filter to amp. That is like massive. It's like serum. So subtractive is almost every soft synth available, or usable consumer synth. They just changed the oscillator type, because it's a signal flow. It's a theory, it's a practice, not just a synthesis type. Alright, so now additive. And I don't know if you guys saw my other streams, I did something on Razor. And when I get into additive, I'm going to go back into that. Additive synthesis is a sine bank. So a sine bank is a group of sine waves, summed sine waves, from a bank to create waveforms. Whoops. Keep on grabbing and moving words. So you can get all these snapshots of amplitude curves and just go and put that into the actual sine bank shape, and you're only limited to the amount of sine waves in that bank. But what that means, though, is that if I say serum has 512 partials, because that's another way to say harmonic inside of an additive synth is partials. So if I say it has 512 partials, it has 512 sinusoid oscillators. It has 512 sine oscillators. Yeah, that completely destroy your CPU if you try to use it at all. But yeah, operator is additive. Its engine is. Most FM synths have additive engines. FM8 is also additive. Citrus is also additive. DX7 isn't, but DX7 only has sine waves, so we can't really knock her for that. But yeah, the cleanest form of FM is through sine waves, and we'll learn that when we talk about FM. FM is probably, besides Carplus Strong physical modeling, my favorite type of synthesis. Not for the webs and yoys, for pretty much everything else, like physical modeling and really understanding sidebands. I think they're fucking awesome. I can sit and read about it for hours. Alright, so frequency modulation. A carrier's oscillator pitch is modulated by the output of another oscillator, or mod oscillator, to create sidebands. I kind of talked about that when I talked about FM8 on how to create sidebands. There's a whole theory and practice to it. I couldn't find anything when I was coming up on what that actually meant. So when I started teaching a class, I had to define that for myself. And that made me just extremely more effective with FM. Just light years difference. You know, hours to like half an hour, you know, making a patch where I'm just sitting down to make a tuba sound. But because I understand it, like I can now sit down and like execute it, not through just guessing and checking, but through like an actual process. And that's kind of cool because I did that myself, and it's not because I'm, you know, trying to say it's easy. This shit's hard, I understand, but I want to, you know, cut that in half for other people, you know, just kind of lead them to the end of the chain, as opposed to giving them a bunch of algorithms to look at and shit for FM and AM. And that's the biggest thing I feel like holds people back from actually making good sounds with FM, because I keep on hearing the same fucking cymatics patch, back to that, just the same wubs and yoys over and over and over. And that's literally like, put some type of really growly type of carrier into a modulator at like a 2-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio. It's just super simple shit. I just want to hear something different. Alright, so wavetable, probably the most milked form of synthesis. Wavetable is really simple. It holds a bank of waveform snapshots that are blended, either crossfaded or spectral blending. And Serum is actually one of the only synths that blends it through spectral. But like I was showing anybody who came to last class, or just thing I was talking about with Nave by Waldorf, it was actually doing that before Serum. And it's actually weird looking and kind of cool. Alright, so now semi-modular. A synth with rearrangeable parts, but limited to its own shell. So that's like Absinthe, Thor, and other, kind of like self-contained, changeable synths. Like if you can change your oscillator type at all. So if I can change it from a waveform oscillator into a wavetable oscillator into a granular oscillator, then I can pretty much, bend it into 50 different sounds. And I would call that semi-modular. And Zebra 2 by Yuhi is also like that. And then there's also one little basic thing that is semi-modular that is now included into most soft synths as a prerequisite thing, and that's the mod matrix. Most people don't get that. They don't understand that before Massive, pretty much, modulation was a lot harder. And you had to go into a lot of menus for a lot of drop-down things. A lot of people knock Massive, but it's like the only synth that did that. And every synth after that had to pivot to make their modulation that basic. And that's, kind of like the whole basis of understanding and growing, is that when you do it the next time, it's easier and quicker and more summed up. So if I'm going to teach anybody the basics of shit, I got to explain it at a 5-year-old level. I also have to understand it at that level. People that, try to teach stuff kind of get bogged down by a lot of the complexity of shit, and so they don't really take a step back to just say, this is what it is, that's it. Not like, let me tell you an essay about some crazy shit. Alright, so full modular. Rearrangeable modules, can send signal anywhere, can create modules in its shell. I say can create because that is a digital function, but if we're talking about, a live modular, that's the same thing. If shell is the universe and modular is the thing, then I make the module in the universe and put it in there, because that's the limitation of modular in hardware form. There is none. You can just plug it into anything, do anything. And I say that because, I was going on rants about it in my Discord earlier, That's the kind of thing that allows you to do anything with frequency. Like I knew some people at Expressions College, and that's over here in California, and they were designing a full app to allow blind people to navigate their houses with an iPad, and they're using Max for Live to do that. So that's something. You can use Max for Live to rearrange the panels in a room to change the size of a room. And they have full rooms that do that. And it's all controlled through Max devices in Ableton. You can use Max to control servos. You can use a line of automation to move around a robot arm. So it's like literally, it just sends signal. That's what it is. Send signal somewhere. Max for Live means max your computer the fuck out. And there's no limitations to the amount of processing Max will use. If you decide I want to put 128 gigabytes of RAM, it will use all 128 gigabytes. There's no limit. You can just server farm the shit out of that. So you can do a ton of shit with it and build a DAW like this. This is all built in Max. And I say it's built-in Max, but that is kind of a loaded definition. This is built-in pure data, and pure data is the fundamental building block of Max. And every single instrument, well, in Max is Max, but also these guys. These are also Max. And also these guys. These are also Max. And also this. This audio clip is Max. Because Ableton didn't have audio arrangement anything until Max for Live was introduced to it. Alright, so a couple more types, and these are the advanced right here. Semi-modular, I would say, is mid tier. Full modular is advanced to all the rest of these. And FM can be advanced, but that is when you're applying FM to physical modeling. Physical modeling is designing the physical thing. You can do that with sine waves. So, granular resynthesis, a sampled waveform unlocked from pitch and time that has full slice and grain control. So, that's resynthesizing the waveform. Granular resynthesis is a warp engine in an oscillator. Granular resynthesis is also spectral. So Serum's engine, when it goes and crunches down a waveform, that's resynthesis. It's resynthesizing the actual waveform into a value. It's taking an audio piece and converting those values into a waveform. So this will be really deep. We'll have a lot of shit to talk about in this. Grain clouds, granular, synths, all that shit. Spectral. Spectral is probably the most, besides percussion, I define it as esoteric because it's really weird. A lot of people don't use it, and even sound designers will argue against getting a lot of the more expensive spectral items. There's a lot of really good spectral modules and all that, like the Melda instruments. Isotope Iris is a spectral resynthesizer. So it breaks a waveform with a filter bank, or waveguide resynthesis. So it's analyzing the spectral content, the frequency range of a waveform, and recreating it. Say like with RX. In Isotope Iris, it can go and use the RX engine to go and resynthesize 2 octaves of samples. So you don't lose any quality in 2 octave ranges from one sample. So there's a million more things you can apply to this though. The whole, I don't know if anybody's heard of Kima, or Kima, however you want to say it. It's a $6,000 processing unit that before Reactor and Max were a thing, this was the only way to do shit that you could do in Reactor to make Karplus Strong shit, granular resynthesis, spectral. So at this point in time now, we can do all this shit with one plugin, which is Reactor or Max. So finally, Karplus Strong, this is probably my favorite one. It's generate noise or impulses sent into a surface, resonator, comb filter, convolution reverb. I say all this because you resonate. So resonator in Ableton filters the noise into a chord. Comb filter combs through that noise and creates a kind of sawtooth-like sound, or at a negative phase creates a square tooth sound. Plus, positive, minus, negative. Convolution reverb, an impulse, spectral. Convolution reverbs are spectral resynthesis, and it's a filter bank all in one. So you drop a sample into a convolution reverb, say Max's verb, and you can run, say this sample was a chord, you can go and filter a percussion loop into a chord using that convolution verb, or a piece of noise. So that's why I include that as a surface. Alright, so this is important to know for creating real emulations. And without that knowledge of what this is, and where to start, you're going to be super lost whenever you go and open one of these synths that have all these really specific terms. Like anything from Applied Acoustics, because Applied Acoustics is one of the best physical modeling companies out there. And they also made tension, they made electric, they also made collision, analog, I believe they made operator as well, and wavetable. So they made all of their synths, but tension and collision, this is a string creator and this is a bell creator. And then you can use Corpus, which is another one of my favorite pieces, which is literally just like a gift. The fact that they gave Corpus in here, because this is there's a physical version of this called Object Delay. Yeah, form is great. Yeah, so Object Delay is literally a plugin version of Corpus and has more stuff. So if you're trying to go deeper into Corpus sounds and stuff, you can use Object Delay, and that's OBJEQ. Object. Alright, y'all, so I've been talking and teaching, but so what's going to happen is I'm going to have 2 classes a week, and you guys can show up or you cannot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 classes, separate ones, I mean. So we're going to do synthesis today, and then we're going to do sampling on Saturday. So synthesis 101. So like I would call this like a kind of an umbrella of a course where it's like synthesis and sampling, because I define them as 2 different things. I don't say a sampler is a synth, because a sampler is not a synth, it's a sampler. And if you are using a sample and a sampler, you're sampling. So you can't really call yourself a sound designer, synthesist, if you're using samples and a sampler to make all your sounds. But you could call yourself anything. A square is actually a trapezoid because it has 4 sides, just like a rectangle, but rectangles are stupid because I don't like them. So yeah, so I actually have like a little like website thing where you can make little quizzes and shit. So I'm gonna write up a quiz. Should I make like a crossword too? A little synthesis crossword. All the terms in a little crossword. Okay, alright, I'll make a crossword. That's hilarious. Yo, straight up fuck rectangles, bro. I plamped that rectangle. I plamped that shit. I plamped a rectangle, call it a circle, am I right? I gotta get like a little, I gotta actually break out my APC40 and make a little fucking sample thing. I can also trigger like delays and shit. Or if you're using a synth sound and sampler. Yeah, I guess you could. You could put them in sampler and use a little FM. That'd be great. Yeah, so, you know, personally, I get triggered when people say, like, not anything you're saying, Baron, but like, when people say that they know kind of like what they're doing, they're like super into sound design, blah, 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 and it's just like, they've never taken the time to understand a synth. And as someone who's like literally devoted my life to it, it's just like I find that offensive, because they're going out there like kind of preaching their knowledge and literally lowering the bar. You know what I mean? Where they're lowering the bar for people who want to strive to what they're doing. and it's not creating a bar that's gonna push shit forward. You know, it's like if, yeah, exactly. It's like Wargore, it's like fucking Skrillex, it's like every person like that. Um, yeah, 100%. But like, yeah. So it's just really about understanding shit, and I think, you know, I just personally, I've taught a lot of people, you know, and like, I'm saying this from like a, you know, just an experience perspective. It's not even jaded, I would say. You know, just I've taught people different ways. I've let them drive in the way, like, say, cymatics has encouraged people to want to learn, which is, give me the preset pack to fit the genre, but tell me that it's sounding like my favorite artist, and I'll pay you $80 for it. And like, I worked for them for a little bit. No, thank you. You know, just no, thank you. I know people who have worked for them. No, thank you. No sound designer who has worked for cymatics enjoys that company, and they're using it as a means to an end, because that's what we all do. You know, I used to ghost produce, and you know, I'm an advocate against it now, because not only did it ruin my life and my well-being in the world, it's like ruined a ton of my friends' lives, and like completely made them leave the scene. So it's like really not beneficial to anybody to be like and doing shit like that. I think the biggest thing though is that, you know, all this shit's here. You guys can learn if you want, pick and choose, and stay objective. You know, everything I'm telling you right now is some fact. You know, everything I listed out in that course curriculum there. But there's a lot of theory and philosophy that goes behind it, into why you do this, what does this, why use a compressor on this, what type of timbre does this have. And that same type of logic can be applied to, you know, designing music, you know, because like I'm super inspired by a lot of people, including people that I would consider my friends and stuff. And like, I don't copy them. You know, I'm inspired by them, just like I'm inspired by Madlib. You know, but I'm not gonna make a Madlib beat, and I'm not gonna sound like Madlib. You know, I'm not gonna go make a Dilla beat or rip off a Dilla track, for that matter. I'm not gonna go, when Shades releases their next track, remix it the next day. You know, that's the kind of shit. That's the kind of like hustle shit that really gets in the way from people like being able to hear the good shit, because so much of that hustle bullshit is in the way of it. So, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, I used to teach in like office hours and blah blah blah, whatever. You know, anybody coming to me like telling me like, oh, how do I make it in this, and blah, what should I expect? And it's like, well, this, you know. And it allows people to be a little bit more objective with why they're in this, you know. So it's like, do you want to be cool, or do you really just love the art? You know, can you not live without doing this every day? You know, can you decide in 5 years that the hype is over and you're over it? You know, and that's really why you should be in this, because in 5 years there should be no hype over. You're the constant hype, you know. And if you're chasing pipe dreams, which I would also define as somebody else's sound too, because you're not trying to be you at that point, you're trying to sound like somebody else. You can go and rationalize it as a genre umbrella, a sonic identity, sonic branding, all things that, you know, I've done for people too, even for companies. And like, that's a company, that's a business, that's not art, you know. If you want to go and say that's art, you know, try to go tell somebody, say on Pinterest or Etsy, who designed a fucking $200 coat from scratch, and then, you know, Victoria's Secret said to one of their new hirees, go find something new, and they just ripped that and sold it for fucking twice that amount. Or maybe even half, you know? They just stole your design straight up. That's the kind of shit, it's like, oh, is that flattering? Is that copying and flattering? Yeah, that happens all the time. It's fast fashion. And I call that type of music fast music because it's done quick, you know? And if you think that having a white noise fucking flutter reese and a donkey snare like Chi is gonna make you fucking make it, by all means go for it, and you're definitely gonna get some traction for sure, and you won't, you know, have any kickback. And I'm just saying that as an example because it's really just representative of a bigger problem, not anybody in particular. Yeah, it is McDonald music. McDonald. But yeah, so that's what this is all about. It's the Church of Sound Design. That's my whole philosophy. If you guys are about it, by all means show up to the next class. But yeah, so like that'll be it for today. You guys sit on some of that shit that I just went through, and come through on Saturday, join my Discord. And if you have any friends that are trying to learn some shit, have them come through. Hey, alright.